Welcome to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. Now here's your host, Tim McMahon.
Hey, it's Tim. While scrolling through Facebook today, I was on the RetroZap group, a great group for an awesome podcast network. My good pal Dennis Keithley from Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels podcast posted this. He said, after watching Rey chase off Tebow in The Force Awakens, I really want to see Rey go to Tatooine and deal with Jawas. Then he asked, any random Star Wars encounters you would like to see? I thought that was a great idea for a podcast, so I'm stealing Dennis's idea, and here are 10 Star Wars encounters I would like to see. All right, the first one's sort of tongue-in-cheek. This is what I posted on Facebook on the RetroZap group in response to Dennis. I said, I want a story about Borg Gullet and the time he won a baby Sarlacc at the county fair. At first, it was just the size of the tip of his tentacle, but then it grew, and it grew, and it grew. But Borg Gullet loved his Sarlacc, whom he named Philip. And at first, he was able to care for it, to feed it, and to give it a good home. But sadly, Borg Gullet slowly came to the realization that Sarlaccs are not meant to be kept as pets, that they need to be free to truly thrive. So with a heavy heart, but with a sense of hope, he set Philip free. So that's the encounter I'd like to see. Again, a bit tongue-in-cheek. So here's 9 others to round out a whole list of 10. I'd like to see Princess Leia and the Emperor together. You know they must have met. She was a senator. He had yet to disband the Senate. I want to see what those encounters were like. I believe we've seen that before in the old Dark Horse comics, but to see them go head-to-head politically, that's an encounter I want to know about. And yes, I know a lot of people complained that there was too much politics in the prequels, myself included, but come on, this is all fantasy, so let me have it. Number 3 is Akbar and Raddus. Yes, I'm putting them together because they're both Mon Cals, but at the same time, they're both military leaders, and, I'm curious, did they get along? Were they rivals? Was Raddus like a mentor to Akbar? How do they act together on the battlefield? What do they do after the battle? I want to see what these guys do when they're hanging out. Simple as that. Number 4 is Figrin Dan and the Modal Nodes versus the Max Rebo Band. Imagine them, if you will, in a battle of the bands. What if they're stuck at some show and they have to share a dressing room? Did they get along? Did they jam? Were there any hotel room shenanigans going on? I'm curious. That's the story I'd want to know. Okay, number 5 is an encounter that's sort of like a battle. I want to see a Rancor battle an Acklay. These are 2 of my favorite creatures in all of the Star Wars films, and if they went head to head, who would win? And I'm going to put a little asterisk on there. I want them to go head to head with no Jedi involvement, because every time a Jedi shows up, one of those poor creatures, it doesn't end well. All right, number 6, Obi-Wan and Han Solo. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Han Solo. Yes, they have met, but I'm sort of imagining what if Obi-Wan had lived, and what if Luke had decided to stay in the rebellion as he's completing his Jedi training. And of course, we know Han's gonna hang around because of Leia. So the 3 of them are gonna interact a lot. I can imagine sort of an oil and water type relationship. Well, no, maybe not quite that harsh. Maybe like Obi-Wan teasing Han Solo from time to time, and Han Solo always being annoyed by Obi-Wan and his foolish ways. But Han would slowly come to respect the old man and enjoy his company and wisdom. That's the story I want to hear. So number 7 is Qui-Gon and Luke. And yes, I know it doesn't work on the timeline, but I'm imagining what if Qui-Gon had lived and he had gone on to become one of Luke's mentors? Well, actually that probably wouldn't work, because if he had lived, then maybe Anakin wouldn't have turned to Darth and blah, blah, blah. Timeline destroyed. So how about this? Since Qui-Gon was the one to discover how to retain your sense of self within the Force after death, what if Qui-Gon showed up as a Force ghost in the original trilogy and he helped Obi-Wan and Yoda train Luke? How would Luke and Qui-Gon interact? How would Luke respond to Qui-Gon's version of the Force? You know what? That's something that interests me, and I'd like to see how that would play out. Number 8 is Ezra and Luke. Could happen, but I honestly doubt we'll ever see it. They're both the same age, they're both strong in the Force. They're very different characters, though. Ezra is very wise of the world and the universe at this point. Luke, being on Tatooine, is very naive, so I can't say I would believe they'd be friends, but I don't know. I don't know how it would play out. Actually, I sort of have this sad story where they would both be trained in the Force, but being 2 young guys, they would end up being rivals. They would start off as friends and then end up as rivals, sort of mirroring the Obi-Wan and Anakin storyline, and well, that doesn't end well for everybody. So yeah, that's what I think would happen with Ezra and Luke. Number 9, just a bit of fun, Constable Zuvio and Rick Olay. Why? because they were both the first toys from their movies, and they both had tiny to no parts in the movies they were in. Yeah, Rick from episode 1, Zuvio from episode 7. The toys came out, we were like, oh wow, who are these characters? These are gonna be so awesome. And then they ended up being nothing. So how about these two show up in a cantina, share a few drinks, and talk about what could have been. And finally, number 10 is sort of a cheat of mine. It's an encounter that was done very well in the Marvel Star Wars comic books not too long ago. Darth Vader and Jabba the Hutt. Wow, you have to go back and check out these issues if you haven't read them. It's everything you would expect and so much more. It's an odd couple. I'm not going to say they were buddies. I'm not going to say they were friends, but man, I want to see that on screen, more of those two together. All right, so those are 10 Star Wars encounters I'd like to see. What about you? What Star Wars encounters would you like to see? I want to know. Email me at 12parsekspodcast@gmail.com or connect with me on any of my social media accounts. All the links can be found on my website, 12parsekspodcast.com. Thanks to Dennis Keithley from Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Check out his podcast. I'll put his links in my show notes and on 12parsekspodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Utini!
Talama Parkwal! Noma!
You've been listening to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy, part of the expanded Fandomverse network of shows. For links and show notes, visit our website, 12parsekpodcast.com. Follow Less Than 12 Parsecs on Twitter at 12parpod, on Instagram at 12parsekspodcast, on Tumblr at 12parsekspodcast, and find us on Facebook as well. And please let us know what you think. Email us at 12parsekspodcast@gmail.com.